Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, this is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 10:30 p.m. here, Calgary, Alberta, Friday night, August the 6th. I'm glad to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And I have the chat room open. If anybody would like to sit in there, that'd be great. I just wanted to continue on talking about a PDF that I had found just looking around on the web. And it's from Child Welfare Information Gateway, and that's www.childwelfare.gov and /pubs, P-U-B-S, /user manuals, /foundation, /foundation.pdf. We've been going over this now for about 2 weeks. It's a huge PDF, 114 pages long. It's called, it's from the Child Abuse and Neglect User Manual series, and it's called A Coordinated Response to Child Abuse and Neglect, the Foundation for Practice. It was put out by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, Administration on Children, Youth and Families, Children's Bureau, and the Office on Child Abuse and Neglect. And just going through it, it's got some good information in there, and I like it. It's a good resource. It was put out in 2003, so it's a little bit old, but compared to some of the material that we see out there, from like the 1990s. It's actually not too old. And I liked what they had to say about a lot of this stuff. They cover a lot on neglect, which I think is not talked about too much, mainly, because the importance, of stopping child abuse, we're concentrating on trying to save children's lives, right? So the physical abuse, of course, it takes precedence, the child sexual abuse. But neglect is also very much a serious problem. It's common. And that's why it's so serious. It's commonplace. Neglect is huge, and millions of children, hundreds of millions of children probably around the world are neglected. But when you add abuse in there, abuse and neglect, it's just that much worse. And I like to take a look at this stuff. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we're studying all the time, looking for information and getting the education, getting the knowledge, and learning and passing this information on. That's why I do these shows. So I'm not a professional counselor or therapist. I don't hold any certificates in those areas. I'm just a private citizen who pays to do my own blog talk shows. And just because I feel that if we're ever going to stop child abuse, we're going to have to start talking about it, and stop hiding, behind a whole lot of denial and pretending that this sort of thing just doesn't happen in families when it does. And if we're going to stop this and solve this problem for these children out here, in the future, we're really going to have to start talking about it. And abuse is such an uncomfortable topic to talk about. I'm totally cool talking about it, but I grew up abused as a child, and I knew a whole lot of kids when I was growing up who were abused. We all hung out together, and we used to talk about it amongst ourselves. And so, not only were we talking about it in our family, some of my siblings and myself would talk about it. Abuse has just been part of my life, my whole life, So I'm okay talking about it, but I know for a lot of people it's a very uncomfortable topic. Even the words child abuse can cause people to just cringe and, feel sick to their stomach, and for people that haven't heard a whole lot about it. So you have to listen at your own discretion. And if it's going to make you uncomfortable, just turn the show off. You will not be hurting my feelings at all. We have to be in a safe place when we're listening to these types of things. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, we're fighting to save children's lives. That's what we do. And, I would hope and just, ask you to have permission to listen to my show. Get permission from an adult, someone you trust, someone that cares about you and what you're doing online. And just make sure it's something that you should be listening to. I don't know where the players are. The Blog Talk players are now. They could be on different websites, and I would never know. And so young people could be listening. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone just okay it, that you can listen to the show, and then they can help you make the decision whether you should be listening to it or not, age appropriate and whatnot. There's a lot of adult content on my shows, and I just believe children should be protected at all times. That's what I do. That's what I'm fighting to stop child abuse and to protect children, to fight for children's rights, And so that's what I'll be doing for the rest of my life. So, you'd be doing me a favor, and especially yourself a favor, by keeping yourself safe online if you're a young person. The FBI has a great website about internet safety, and They talk a lot about, how to stay safe online, how to keep yourself safe. There's all kinds of great tips out there. And if you just type into your browser, internet safety, online safety for children, that will take you to a whole lot of websites that have some great information on there on how to stay safe online, right? So important. So we're going to continue talking about this topic, and I'm really interested in it. I want to, our main goal with Dreamcatchers for Abused Children is to promote education, awareness, and prevention of child abuse, right? So I want to have a friend in the chat room. Hi, Ann. How's it going? I'm so glad that you're here. And yeah, it's so important that we get the education out there, and find ways and get the programs out there that are going to help families and help children, so we can stop this mess, right? All we ever see in the paper are headlines, and the headlines are so sad, and I never skip over them. I read them, and I think about these poor children and what they're going through. I know firsthand what it's like to be abused, and I know what a lot of them are going through. And it's so sad to think that we can't help them tonight. There's nothing we can do tonight. You know what I mean? And it just it bothers me, and I have to fight, every day to do whatever, myself, not just me, tens of thousands of advocates out here doing this work, right, to try to help stop child abuse, save children's lives, and especially in North America with all the resources. And $104 billion annually gets pumped into, this is the latest stats, are $104 billion are spent annually from the government just because of child abuse. Now, that's ridiculous, $104 billion. And why it hasn't been stopped, and why we haven't come up with some better programs, and why we haven't had some think tanks sit down and start thinking about what's not working, get rid of that, come up with something that is going to work, build on the things that are working. There are programs out there that are working. They're just not nationwide. They're only in certain school districts. They're only in certain counties within the United States. And Canada, different provinces have different programs that are making progress, but they're not nationwide. They only affect a very small portion of children in a certain community. So, of course, this is a nationwide epidemic, child abuse, right? Well, it's actually a worldwide epidemic. And so $104 billion annually just in the United States getting pumped out because of child abuse. I mean, I'd like to see them just take the $104 billion 1 year and just stop child abuse, and then we don't have to continue to pay the $104 billion because of child abuse, and then we don't have to have any more children being abused, right? Well, there has to be a way to do this, and really, honestly, it's going to come down to changing the way people think and feel about their children, and the way that people think and feel about themselves as parents and as adults on this planet, and because abuse is a choice. People don't have to abuse their children. There's no one holding something over them saying, you have to abuse your child. Abuse is a choice. It's so sad, and that's what's so bad about it, is that parents choose to abuse. Parents, husbands and wives choose to abuse each other. Boyfriends, girlfriends choose to abuse each other. Bullies on the school grounds choose to picket fights and abuse other children. And we have to, as a society and as communities and society in the world as a whole, is going to have to start changing the way that they think and feel about people and about children, right? And we got a lot of work ahead of us, so, that's why I'm just going to continue to do this until I drop, you know what I mean? I want to see a change, and I want to be part of the change, and I got tired of sitting on the couch and saying, well, it's great other people are involved, that's wonderful, and coming from the home that I did, growing up with abuse and domestic violence and whatnot, I finally got to the point where about 3 years ago I thought, what am I doing sitting on the couch? I know all about this firsthand, and I'm going to sit here in silence, and I'm not going to say anything or get involved or try to help these children out here who today, sadly, are going to die at the hands of their parents or caregivers, right? So that's why it's so important that we do this. So we'll get right on looking at this article, and we left off about page 35, and they're talking about, parental sort of what causes a parent to actually, what can cause a parent to actually abuse their children, right? And sort of the factors involved. And that was about page 35, 36, and that's where we left off. So I want to continue looking at that. And they list here the actual reasons pretty much for it. The different factors they list are parent or caregiver factors, family factors, child factors, and environmental factors. Then they go in to talk about all that. And they said that we had already looked at the parent or caregiver factors, and that's the parent or caregiver factors potentially contributing to maltreatment relate to personality characteristics and psychological well-being, history of maltreatment. If they were, abused as children or mistreated as children themselves, they don't always, but they might go on to abuse their own children, especially if they don't get help, right? Substance abuse is a big problem. Attitudes and knowledge, that's where we left off, and age. So there's all these different factors involved. And I'm not going to reread that stuff. You can just listen to it. Go back if you really want to, or just go to the article, www.childwelfare.gov/pubs, P-U-B-S, /user manuals, /foundation, /foundation.pdf. And we left off with attitudes and knowledge. And they said negative attitudes and attributions about a child's behavior and inaccurate knowledge about child development may play a contributing role in child maltreatment. For example, some studies have found that mothers who physically abuse their children have both more negative and higher than normal expectations of their children, as well as less understanding of appropriate developmental norms. Not all research, however, has found differences in parental expectations. It says a parent's lack of knowledge about normal child development may result in unrealistic expectations, and unmet expectations can culminate in inappropriate punishment. For example, a parent hitting a 1-year-old for soiling his pants. And that's just one example. I mean, and this is what we see out there, in the headlines. We cover the headlines on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio on certain nights, and, the headlines are posted on our website at www.dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com. And Sandra posts those every day. She finds them and posts them and puts them on there, and we read them and check them out. It's horrible what's happening, and we see quite often parents will kill their children for something like taking a muffin off of the stove. This one little boy was killed because he was 10 years old. I'm not sure how old he was. He might not have been 10 years old. He might have been somewhere close to that. But anyway, he grabbed a muffin off the stove, and his father tortured him for 3 days and beat him and broke his neck. And he said it was because he took the muffin off the stove. He says, I had to teach him a lesson because he stole the muffin. That's inappropriate, punishment for something like taking a muffin off the stove. And this is what we're seeing parents doing. They're losing control. They're out of control. They probably never had any control, and they obviously have issues, and they need help, right? It says other parents may become frustrated with not knowing how to manage a child's behavior and may lash out at the child. And that was my parents, all of this stuff relates to my parents. My parents were highly abusive people, and they were very ignorant and uneducated and had no idea how to raise children, and they had 7 children. They just didn't have a clue. And they were both abused themselves as children, so it was just absolutely horrible. Still others may have attitudes that devalue children or view them as property. And that's a problem when parents see their children as just property, something that they can dispose of or throw around or misuse, mistreat, and they don't have any, there's no connection to them as being precious, as being this precious gift to them in their lives. They think of them as if they would a purse. They just throw it down, they just, they think of it as like a piece of garbage and just throw it out, It's extremely sad, and it's wrong, and it's unfortunate is what it is. It's a real problem. The next one they talk about is hello, hi Maisie, how's it going? I've got some friends here in the chat room. That's very nice. It's awesome to have you guys here. Age is another problem. That's another factor that can contribute to child maltreatment and neglect and abuse. Right? They're talking here. Caretaker age may be a risk factor for some forms of maltreatment, although research finds are inconsistent. And I'm going to put that link in the chat room for you guys, and so you can take a look at this PDF download if you want to download it. I downloaded it. It's 114 pages. It's a very extensive PDF, but it's really worth taking a look at if you're interested in more of this information, right? I don't know if I'm going to read the whole 114 pages, but I just thought I'd sort of touch on some of the main points, and that's what we're doing this last week or so here. So age is another factor, and I'll continue reading on there. Caretaker age may be a risk factor for some forms of maltreatment, although research findings are inconsistent. Some studies of physical abuse in particular have found that mothers who were younger at the birth of their child exhibited higher rates of child abuse than did older mothers. And other contributing factors such as lower economic status, lack of social support, and high stress levels may influence the link between younger childbirth, particularly teenage parenthood, and child abuse. And they don't, obviously this is, the studies are pretty much, they're just studies, and they just do what they can with the material they have. Not all young people abuse their children. That's a fact. There's good young mothers out there who love their children and would do anything for them, and work extremely hard to raise their children. Then there's older parents that abuse their children, even though they should know better and they've been on the planet long enough. And it is inconsistent, for sure. But I guess they're just saying that age can play a factor, right? Family factors. Specific life situations of some families, such as marital conflict, domestic violence, single parenthood, unemployment, financial stress, and social isolation may increase the likelihood of maltreatment. While these factors by themselves may not cause maltreatment, they frequently contribute to negative patterns of family functioning. And that's a huge issue. Domestic violence, domestic abuse. Quite often, it spills down to the children. That's what happened in our case. This whole dysfunction. Not coping. Quite often, when parents are having marital problems, there's the coping skills are definitely not there. They're just not handling things well, and abuse can happen in that situation because tensions are high. Tension is high. People are upset, job loss, could be substance abuse in there too, and then you have a real big mess. And this is what we see with a lot of children. And so yeah, it is very, very hard. I know firsthand what that's all about. And it's a shame because had the parents get some help, if the parents would get some help, this could be avoided. Like my parents were brought up on abuse charges. They had to go to court, and I was a toddler, I was about 2 years old, and my brother had shown up at school with bruises and whatnot. He was wearing a turtleneck in the summertime, and the nurse noted the bruises, took him to the nurse. The teacher took him to the nurse, and then they were asking him, what happened, and he said he was afraid to go home. He was afraid of my dad. So my parents got brought up on charges, and they were told to get court-ordered counseling. They had to go to counseling, or they were going to lose us. We were going to be removed from the home, and they went twice. Right, and then that was it. And then we moved away. Right, we moved to Canada. So, this is the sort of thing that can happen. People slip through the cracks. They don't want to get help. My parents did not want to get help. I talked about that this morning on my One Child Abuse Survivor to Another Blog Talk radio program. Actually, all week I've sort of been talking about all that because it's just unfortunate that parents, my parents had the opportunity to get help. And here my mom was crying to the courts, oh, don't take my children. I love my children. They're all I have. And, she was in this loveless marriage, and she had 5 children living at home. 2 had already moved out, and here she is. They have the opportunity to get some help, and they both didn't want to pursue it. They went to 2 sessions. That was it. They were so used to living in this dysfunction. They were so used to living this life the way that they had been living it for so long. My mom was 38 when I was born, and she was not supposed to have any children after she was like 30, and she had like 2 or 3 more. It was absolutely horrible and hard on her. She was not emotionally and stable enough and capable enough to raise these children, or physically, right? And she was very sick, and my dad was had mental problems, borderline schizophrenic, and my mom was manic depressive, so the 2 of them did not do well together, and it was a recipe for disaster is what it was. And so had they gotten counseling for themselves, because they were both abused as children, had they gone and got some separate counseling for themselves for their past abuse, right, and then got some family and marriage counseling, I believe that our family would have made it. I really do. I don't think that the destruction that came about because of the way that my parents treated us and they treated each other, I think that would have been avoided, and things would have been completely different. It's just so sad to see this, right? Because parents are struggling, and who gets hurt? The children. And if parents are hurting each other, well, that's too bad, and it's sad, and it's very unfortunate. But these children have no choice. they're stuck in these homes unless someone gets them out, to safety. And so it's very, very hard, and it's not, there's no easy answer because people, quite often we hear about these horrible situations in foster homes, right? So had we been removed from the home, we might have ended up in worse situations in foster care. We really need to work to change what's not working. You know what I mean? Like as a group of, as all the advocates out there and everyone, we need everyone's voice. We really need everyone to become an advocate, like all of us, everyone. And then of course the abusers, they wouldn't want to be advocates, so we'd be able to sort of pinpoint them. You know what I mean? We'd be able to sort of see who they are because they're not standing up to be advocates. You know what I mean? Everyone should be involved and do whatever you can to help change this thing, right? I believe if we all got involved, we could do it. And it has to change. Children are being removed from these abusive homes and then put into abusive foster care situations, or other family members who abuse them, right, which can happen. So it's so hard. It's extremely hard, and these children don't deserve this. They don't deserve to be treated like this, and no child deserves to be brought up in fear and pain and abused, right? Of any abuse of any kind. I don't care what it is, whether it's physical, sexual, verbal, psychological, emotional. It's all wrong and it all hurts, and it's not. No child deserves that. Family structure is what they talk about next. Children living with single parents may be at higher risk of experiencing physical and sexual abuse and neglect than children living with two biological parents. Single-parent households are substantially more likely to have incomes below the poverty line, and lower income, the increased stress associated with the sole burden of family responsibilities and fewer supports are thought to contribute to the risk of single parents maltreating their children. In 1998, they said here, 23% of children lived in households with a single mother, and 4% lived in households with a single father. And a strong positive relationship between the child and the father, whether he resides in the home or not, contributes to the child's development and may lessen the risk of abuse. It says, in addition, studies have found that compared to similar non-neglecting families, neglectful families tend to have more children or greater numbers of people living in the household. Chronically neglecting families often are characterized by a chaotic household with changing constellations of adult and child figures. For example, a mother and her children who live on and off with various others, such as a mother's mother, the mother's sister, or a boyfriend. And then they said here, here's an actual article on the child abuse and the father absence connection, and this is very something that I know a lot of people are talking about, just because there's so many broken homes, there's so many families out there who their families are destroyed, they're just broken, and then there's a single mother trying to raise these children without the absence of the father. So they've done a little bit of looking into that, which is interesting for me because I haven't really studied into that. It says the child abuse and father absence connection. The rate of child abuse in single-parent households is 27.3 children per thousand, which is nearly twice the rate of child abuse in two-parent households, which is 15.5 children per thousand. So it's twice as high, right? This was back in 2003, but I'm not sure when this study was done. But this article came out, this actual PDF came out in 2003. So obviously the numbers are going to have changed, right? They change every day, but it just depends on when you actually get the stats, right? We're looking at like last year's stats. We don't even have the stats for this year. I mean, they might be out there now, but when I was searching for them earlier this spring, they weren't there, and into the summer, right? So an analysis of child abuse cases in a nationally representative sample of 42 counties found that children from single-parent families are more likely to be victims of physical and sexual abuse than children who live with both biological parents. Compared to their peers living with both parents, children in single-parent homes had 77% greater risk of being physically abused, 87% greater risk of being harmed by physical neglect, 165% greater risk of experiencing notable physical neglect, and that's crazy, 74% greater risk of suffering from emotional neglect, and 80% greater risk of suffering serious injury as a result of abuse, 120% greater risk of experiencing some type of maltreatment overall. So that's terrible. And that was done, a sample of 42 counties that they looked at, and that's the percentages that they came up with. So, single-parent homes, single-parent families, there's some struggling going on there, and you can just imagine, like, I mean, especially today with what's going on today, job loss, the economy's not good, single parents, trying to raise kids, and they have no money, and they might have a little bit of substance abuse problems, and then they've got emotional problems, and they're stressed out and high-strung, and that's why we see parents are murdering their children, stabbing them and killing them and doing all kinds of horrible things to them, right? Just in the paper every day we're seeing these headlines popping up, and it's horrible. And if they're not killed, they're in the hospital due to these abuse-related injuries. It's so unfortunate that the parent is then hauled off to jail. The child is now in the care of the authorities. Now, where are they going to place that child? It's a bad situation, and that's why we have to do something to stop this. You know what I mean? We can't just sit around and say, oh, leave it up to somebody else, or it's somebody else's problem. It's like, no, it's all of our responsibility. We owe it to these children. I don't have children. I would have loved to have children. It just didn't happen, and I lost the only baby that I actually would have had, and halfway through a miscarriage, right? So, unfortunately, this is very sad, but that's the way it goes. I never did have children, but I love children, and I think, because I grew up abused, I know what these kids are going through out here, and it bothers me that, I honestly, it bothers me. I have a real hard time because I know what they're going through, and I can't. There's nothing I can do, except for what I'm doing, which is just a start. But the thing is as long as we all do something, especially take a look around at the children in your lives, your own children, if you have grandchildren, or if you have relatives with children, make sure they're not being abused. Know the signs and symptoms of abuse. Learn to spot it. Learn how to report it. How to report it properly. If a child comes to you and discloses that they're being abused, you just never know when a child is going to come to you and tell you that they're being abused. You want to know how to properly report it, because if you don't report it properly, the information could be thrown out of court. The child could be placed back in the home and killed. We see that happens quite a bit. So, you want to know how to report it. It's very simple. It's just a simple, who, what, when, where. We're not supposed to lead the questions. We're not supposed to ask questions. We're supposed to let the child tell us in their own voice and write it down. And we're supposed to write down detailed descriptions of what you see and how the child is feeling. Detailed descriptions of bruises or scars, marks, any kind of physical abuse or neglect that we can see. We're supposed to write down, what the child says in their own words, and not put any of our own words in there as far as what the child is stating has happened. And just be very descriptive about what you see on the child, if you see marks or welts or burns or anything like that. And don't say the child appeared to be hurt. You want to say there was a bruise on the child's left cheek, burn mark on the child's left leg, bruises on, whatever the case may be. It has to be very specific. You can get that information from all kinds of great websites out there, and you can also get it from us, and that's from dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com. We have it's a free PDF download, the Child Abuse Handbook, compiled by Donna Shear, Sandra Potter, and there's all the signs and symptoms in there of all the different kinds of abuse, and then there is the section about reporting abuse, how to report it, and then all kinds of information in there. There's telephone numbers, resources, information for people, and information for parents who, if you're a parent and you're struggling and you're saying, man, I love my children, I do not want to hurt my children, and I need to get help, right? Well, there's numbers in there for parents, who need help, right? And they don't want to hurt their children. And but yet they don't know who to call, or that they don't even realize that there are people out there that they can call, and they can get help, right? They don't have to hurt their children. So if you're a parent and you're listening to this and you're struggling and you're thinking, man, my child is a discipline case and I don't know how to handle it, I don't want to hurt my child, there's help out there for both of you. You don't have to abuse your child, and you don't have to hurt your child. You can get help, right? And you can get the child some help. So this is the whole thing. We can prevent child abuse. We can stop it. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I got about a minute left. I appreciate everybody in the chat room. I just think that's really awesome. Thanks for stopping in, and I hope you got something out of the show. I'll be back on tomorrow with worldwide epidemic of child abuse and human rights abuses, And I'll be also back on with Mount Bethel Christian Worship and Fellowship on Sunday, just because I love to read the Bible and love to share the Word of God. So if you want to join me for that, that's great. I'll be back on again Monday morning, one child abuse survivor to another. And don't forget the UK rally against child abuse to stop child abuse is on tomorrow. Check out the websites. You can check it out on blogtalkradio.com/Be Safe First Always, or www.besafefirstalways.com. And that is John Harrison. He's a poet, he's an author, he's a survivor of child abuse, and he's one of the people that's going to be involved with the UK rally against child abuse. And this is happening in Trafalgar Square in London, and this is tomorrow. Actually, it's the UK time, right? 1:00 p.m. And so I wish I could be there. It's just unfortunate that I couldn't go. I would love to be there. It's going to be a public meeting for survivors and for people who are interested in stopping child abuse, and anybody who wants to, who's in London and who's in the area, make sure you stop in there and check it out. So take care of yourselves, everybody. Have a great night. If you need anything, get a hold of me at Blog Talk Radio here or Facebook. I'll be around on the weekend, and just wishing you all well. Thank you so much for tuning in to all my shows. I really appreciate it. And just make sure you take care of yourselves. Keep reaching out if you're a survivor. Get a hold of me if you need resources or information. I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor, but I've been there. And with so many others, there's so many others out there who have been there and they know what it's like. Reach out and talk to someone, even if it's not me. Talk to someone and get some help, right? So have a great night, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.